I'm good, yeah. Good morning, folks. Might I ask you to take your seats? We're going to begin in the next moment. So get a last refill of caffeine and take a seat. Thank you. Okay, good morning, good morning. Welcome, Fáilte go Gios an Ostan Seo on this absolutely stunning morning. Amir na Galliva, Colette Conley, Ara Ann Rabbit, Las Uchtron Cumann Trachtan na Galliva, Dermot Nolan, Gwini Ushlag at the Cordial Galair, and our friends joining us online, live streaming via YouTube, I think is the correct terminology, but anyways, I'll be corrected on that. Welcome to this morning's event, which is quite a unique and quite a special event, and one that we're very proud to be involved in. My name is Kenny Deary, CEO of Galway Chamber. So for a little bit of context, there are many partners involved in this event, and indeed, as we look around the room, we look at the stands that are here exhibiting. We've representations from Employability Galway, Galway Regional Development, the Department of Social Protection, Galway City Partnership, Forum Connemara, Connect for Work. We also have strong representation from the Disability Federation of Ireland and indeed partners in Galway Chamber, among others. It's wonderful to see such collaboration and participation, and hopefully that will add to the richness of the outcomes that we have from this event. Now, for a little context in terms of today, and I suppose what are the critical asks, or what would good look like as we travel this journey? And it's earlier last year, as part of the Dormant Accounts Fund, an action plan was being pulled together, and the Department of Social Protection invited applications from interested parties, organisations who wished to support and improve the employment opportunities, including self-employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I suppose it's how we can enhance the lived experience as well, which is critical. To support potential employers to provide employment for people with disabilities, Galway City Partnership secured funding, and I acknowledge Declan Brazel and indeed his team here, who secured funding from the Dormant Account Fund for this unique project, which we'll hear more a bit on in a while from Sharon Doyle and indeed others. However, it's with the support of ourselves in Chamber and the Disability Federation. We're already working directly with employers in the region to support them to become more disability confident. I think one critical component out of this morning that we'll understand is language, and how language is important, and not to be afraid of the language, but yet to make strident efforts. The objectives are about sharing and dispersing information, giving advice, and providing support, providing disability awareness training, and some of that has already been provided by peers. Disability Federation in tandem with ourselves, and indeed disability audits. And that sounds like a scary term, but it's actually proactively helping businesses make sure that we are doing the right things, because sometimes there can be unintended consequences. And I think one of the critical things as we look at this, and particularly since I'm in this role about 2.5 years, and I would have been, I have to say, fairly ignorant in terms of the disability challenges that many organisations had until, or individuals had, until coming into this role. And I think as we went through the COVID journey, I see Marie from Access for All here, and one of the learnings that we had is there are so many unintended consequences sometimes when businesses are doing things to comply with procedures on one hand. I always remember one premises adamant that they were getting people to sanitize coming in the doors. They put the COVID sanitization station right in the middle of the doorway coming in, but what they hadn't realized is they'd precluded customers who were wheelchair users from entering the premises. Again, it's those unintended consequences that we just need to be aware of and watch out for. And I think as we get better, we learn more through events like this, through initiatives like this, we do become truly more equal. I think the critical ask from this event for our participants online, and indeed those present who are employers and indeed potential employees, it's about becoming a disability confident employer. It's about rethinking recruitment and the way that you approach the practices. And it's about expanding well-paying and rewarding sustainable employment. And I think that's one of the key things that I know Mary's going to talk to in Connect for Work, is it's one thing placing somebody, but actually how do you sustain them in that employment and within their position then is critically important. And then it's about cultivating partnerships. We have partnerships here. This is not just Galway City. We have our colleagues in from Forum representing the wider Connemara area. There are so many people and players here this morning, including the Minister, which is wonderful, and we look forward to hearing from Anne in terms of how this sits in comparison to what's happening nationally and how we can do more and be better as well. It's about tackling the pervasive and outdated perceptions, and as I said, language is important, and those perceptions are there as well, and helping educate employers and employees in terms of making the environment that we all operate in better. So I'll be queuing for now, and it's with great honour and great pleasure that I call Mayor of Galway, Councillor Colette Connolly, to the podium to have some opening remarks. Colette, Gurmaiga. Round of applause.
Garamagad Ken, and as always, very difficult to follow Ken. I think he said it all there. Marvera Cahan na Galiva, Quirum Falche Rove, Ermajan and Ermajan, Agus Tommy Harvey Sauce, the Veil Sholiev in your. As Mayor of Galway, I'd like to welcome you all here this morning and thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a very worthy project, and as Mayor, let me start by commending the collaborative approach to this project, Inclusive Pathways to Employment. I'd like to acknowledge the Declan Brazel from Galway City Partnership, Kevin Dempsey from the Disability Federation of Ireland, and indeed Ken Deary from the CEO of Galway Chamber. I think that Galway, a long time ago, and when I started in politics in 2004, we put heavy emphasis on putting in objectives, and indeed I was chair of the City Development Board at the time, was to make Galway a city of equals, to make Galway an inclusive city. And while they were very worthwhile goals, and we did make some progress in terms of access certificates and an awareness around access for buildings and that, we've a long way to go. And we're certainly not an inclusive city, unfortunately. But while we have made strides, we still have a lot to go. We have a lot to do. So this project in particular focuses on one aspect, and that is employment. And as we all know, Ken has mentioned language and the importance of language. And I think that really is the kernel. I think it's very, very important that we focus in on ability and not disability, that we focus in on equality and rights. And as Mayor, I think that it's extremely important to voice that and to see where we can go in this more collaborative partnership approach to make people aware and cognizant of their own role, whether they are a restaurant or whether they are a coffee shop or whether they're just an ordinary citizen, that they have a role to play as well in creating a city of equals. And I think we have the ability, certainly in Galway, as a very small city, and certainly with all the wonderful people that are here, the groups from the Community Forum, the Access for All, the City Partnership, indeed the presence today of Antara and Rabbit is indicative of maybe a change and going forward in the future. We all know that people with disabilities suffer enormously in terms of, more than the average population, in terms of adequate housing, in terms of access to transport, be it private transport or public transport. We know that they suffer more in terms of educational attainments and in terms of health. And employment, more than anything, gives people self-worth, self-esteem, financial independence. So it can never be underestimated the need, the absolute need for people with disabilities to enter employment, because it will tackle all those issues and will contribute significantly to the mental health and well-being of people with a disability. And Ken also mentioned audits, and I think it's not a frightening word. What's frightening is the results of those audits, when it tells you time and time again how inaccessible our city is for people. And we will all suffer from a disability at one time or another, through an accident, through old age. And I think that maybe it's time, a sea change in our thoughts and how we conduct business as a city, as a county, and as a country. So I just, again, would encourage employers here this morning across the city and county to embrace this project, to embrace and to be more inclusive, and see what that will bring to their own business and to the city and county. So, cohortigus le gatena agus garamila makif kaler. Kanyari Antalya.
One thing I realised as I was stepping down and looking at the fire exit sign, I'm derelict in my duty as MC. I was supposed to let you know that in the unlikely event of anything happening, you can go out through the door you've come in, or there's fire exits on either side of the room here, and just to double check that phones are on silent. We do welcome you using phones, though. Part of the way that we can increase advocacy and raise awareness is by people tweeting and LinkedIn posting and Facebooking and so on and so forth. So please do take pictures and tag. You have the logos there of all the different organisations. Please feel free to share content and talk to your lived experience of this morning, and for those online and at home as well. And then all the organisations will pick up and reshare. As I say, this is all a journey. It's now with great pleasure that I get to call Minister Anne Rabbitte, TD Minister of State at the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth at the Department of Health. Quite a title, Anne, but listen, welcome to the stage, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Ken, for the invite, and thank you, Mayor Connolly, for your words in advance. The most nervous and head-wrecking piece I had there this morning was I was afraid I'd trip coming up the steps, so I've made it safely to the stage. So that was all that was bothering me there for the last few minutes. So look at, and I think Ken has really put it together in how he has presented this. This is really a collaborative working together. So when I walked in the door here this morning, the first thing I recognised is Galway Rural Development, all the way through to Forum Connemara, all my partners that I have known through the last number of months. And one of my first phone calls at the beginning of my brief was talking to Ken as to how we can work well together. So my role here this morning is to bring the national platform to the stage here in Galway. And with that, I'm going to share with you what is ongoing and how we're all working together. So I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you today at the Powered by Inclusion programme. And it is great to be back home in County Galway, and it's always a great honour to be invited to talk to you about work underway in my department to promote the employment of people with disabilities and the important role which government plays in this regard. I would like to extend a particular thank you to the Disability Federation of Ireland for hosting this event and inviting me to speak at it. And I would also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce, Galway City Partnership, Forum Connemara, who also played an important role in organising the event. To begin with, let me say that the Irish Government is wholeheartedly committed to ensuring that persons with disability can access employment so that they are supported to live the lives that they want to live and are provided equal opportunities to do so. This commitment is made through specific legislation and actions contained in Ireland's two overarching disability policy frameworks. That's the National Disability Inclusion, and that otherwise known as the NDIS, and the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for Persons with Disability. Facilitating and supporting people with disabilities to gain meaningful employment in a rights-based issues. And that's what the Mayor spoke about. It's a rights-based issues. And with this in mind, Ireland has ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability on the 20th of March 2018. And this marked an important milestone in that process to strengthen the rights of people with disability in Ireland. And as Minister for State with responsibility, my approach to meeting the obligations of the UNCRPD is one of progressive realisation each year moving forward on these commitments. And if I was just to actually move away from the speech, The most important thing we can give people is the empowerment. It's the right to access, and it's to how to support. And it's important to break down the barriers. And for far too long, the barriers have been in place. But Ken is right. It's about the language. It's about the understanding. It's about working in partnership. And I see my colleagues there from the Department of Social Protection. And they have done so much work within that department in breaking down the barriers. And actually, I talked to them just as I came into the room in relation to the easy-to-read book that was produced just before Christmas. And that talks about the disregard. And anybody that is in employment or anybody that works in the public face of encouraging people to participate in work should actually have one of those books there on it. Because straight away, it tells people actually you can access employment, but you don't need to lose your supports. It talks about the disregards. And at the same time, only in the last number of weeks, Minister Humphreys has actually launched a new consultation piece about how to support employers. So we don't just look at it in one side within government, we look at it both. We look through the lens of the person accessing employment, but we also look at it through the lens of the employer and supporting both. Because if we support both, because we know at the moment in relation to those audits, what they tell us, it tells us very, very clearly that people with disability are marginalised when it comes to accesses in employment. And we have to look at how we can support the person. And the person is an individual, but for a person to make a step into employment, it isn't just how you support them on the first day and you leave them. There is a whole process in preparing them for that interview, in preparing them for the accommodation that would be required, but also in supporting them on one side and supporting the employer on the other side. As everybody would know, as Minister for State with responsibility for disability, in the past, health was really what that minister focused on. It was completely on a health lens. And when the Taoiseach gave me the opportunity to become the Minister for State, he says, you now need to move it from health and you have to bring it to the Department of Equality because we need to focus it on a very wider lens. And that meant then, and I knew when he given me the job, it meant I had to step on an awful lot of other ministers' toes to tell them that this is about rights, it's not a health-based issue. That's exactly what we are doing. So when I talk about Fóra Connemara and Karen Mannion, who for the past number of months would have spoken to me in relation to how we can ensure that we have people who are young people leaving school, that they're given the opportunity. They're given the opportunity to access the choice that they don't have to go into daycare services, that they can actually access education. They can actually access employment. And we give them the choice, as opposed to the narrow lens of the past, that when you left school, you had only one option, and that was daycare services. That is so wrong. That is such a narrow vision entirely. And the work that the Comprehensive Employment Strategy, the NDIS, the NDA are doing to break down those barriers and bringing together right at a local level, like what we're seeing happening here in Galway this morning, is all what it's about. And it's not just happening in Galway. I know I'm after meeting friends there from Westport. It's right across that it is happening. The Chamber of Commerces are leading from the front. They're working with their membership. They're also working with various partners in their city and county councils to ensure that we have a collective approach. And when you have a collective approach, you put the person at the centre. And when you have the person at the centre, you make a real change. And that's the rights-based approach that we need to have. So I've completely diverted from the script. The reason I've diverted from the script, Ken, was because I believe it's important to acknowledge the person in the round, society in the round. And disability is not straight down the middle. Disability comes in all shapes and models and sizes and ages. And it's often important to realise the most important thing, that only 20% of the persons that have a disability were born with that disability. 80% acquire it after the age of 18. These were people that were part of education, part of the workforce, that understood what it was like to be participating. So we have to actually break down our mindset as to what disability looks like. We have to be very open. We have to be agile in our approach. We have to look at the entrepreneur as well as the person that was in college, as well as the person that was in employment. And when we do that, we'll have a more inclusive society, but at the same time, we'll have a richer society of inclusion, and we will be the better for it. So in that, I want to commend the Chamber of Commerce, the City Partnership, City Council, and all the partners that are here, and the DFI, for the work that they're continuing to do. We're only at the start of the journey. By no manner of means are we even halfway down the track on this, but we are at the start. It's a positive start, and I believe that any young people leaving education at this moment in time, the future is very bright for them. It is really bright for the choice, for the basis is there's choice, availability, understanding, language, and meaning behind it. And if government can recognise and support at a local level and support employers and support the individual, I believe we are doing our job. Gura Mahagath.
Thank you, Minister. And I think that statistic is quite startling and something that I hadn't realised, 80% acquiring the disability after the age of 18. And it causes us to, if we hadn't already, to reflect in a more sincere way, because you never know who or where or what it is down the road. I think also the interplay between health and equality and that evolution of a journey that you're doing. So the best of luck as you continue to stand on ministers' toes and departmental toes in terms of trying to drive that agenda. So now we move on to the next speaker, and this is one of our virtual attendees, but a keynote indeed, and really looking forward to it. For those who are with us online, we want to make this as interactive as possible, so you can raise questions through, I think it's the Q&A function. Is there a Q&A function, I think? People can interplay with Kevin, and as questions come in, Kevin Dempsey from the DFI will relay them to us as well. But our next speaker is entitled, and again, language is important, a pharmacist first, but a speaker, facilitator, and a non-exec director. In 2012, Jack Kavanagh suffered a life-changing spinal cord injury, leaving him with 15% muscle function. In the years since, Jack challenged the perceived limitations of his situation. In 2014, Jack gave the acclaimed TEDx talk, Fearless Like a Child, Overcoming Adversity, and in 2019 was awarded as one of the 10 Outstanding People of the Year. He has received several international awards for his documentary Breaking Boundaries. As a pharmacist, speaker and facilitator, Jack is passionate about the value of health and well-being as drivers for business performance, coupled with cultivating diverse and inclusive environments where people belong and are valued. And I think that's critically what we're getting at here today. Jack is the host of the Only Human podcast and sits on the board of directors of the National Disability Authority and Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, as well as the leadership development organisation Common Purpose Ireland. Check out the Breaking Boundaries documentary and the Only Human podcast at jack-kavanagh.com. And I have to say, I'm really excited and looking forward to this. I've not heard Jack before, so I'm probably in the minority in many ways. But we'd like, I think, to hand over to Jack now, who's going to come into us virtually, and we look forward. Jack.
You can see me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, hello, and I am really delighted to be here today. It's always strange coming in from a distance. I'm speaking to you from County Meath, and I'd love to be there in person, but circumstances just didn't allow today. And so for the next couple of minutes that we're going to spend together, I would like to say welcome. Welcome to the space that we're creating. The words that Kenny has spoken so far, that the Minister shared with us, and so on, have really struck at the heart of what days like today and mornings like this are all about. And I think it's really about challenging perceptions, shifting perspectives, and showing humanity. So often in our lives we think, wouldn't it be wonderful if I had a goal or an ambition, a place I wanted to get to, be it in my personal life or my professional life, within my business, and if I went from a place of the inception of that idea at point A to arriving at the end goal at point B, wouldn't it be great if we went there in a straight line? Well, just for a moment, I'd like you to think about a heart rate monitor. And if you go from one side of a heart rate monitor to the other in a straight line, it's not great news. And so, really, what a better reflection of life is, and what the reality that we all experience as we go about taking on challenges like we're discussing today within our businesses and within our personal lives, in achieving anything meaningful. The journey often follows the ups and downs of the heartbeat. It's the thing that ties us together and makes us more similar than we are different. As we go through that journey of highs and lows, there are periods of change and transition, ups and downs, places where we meet new parts of ourselves, and when we're challenged to reset our expectations and our default mode of operating. It's also the reason that I believe that my story is just your story written in different words, because we all share that journey of peaks and troughs together. From the moment that any one of us enters the world, the environment around us is shaping us, and the extent to which our ability and our potential is expressed or depressed, enabled or disabled. And so then it's only natural that we would see a diversity of ability, be it mentally, emotionally, physically. You see, I believe the only thing that actually disables any individual is the environment in which they exist. That can be the environment physically, yes, in the case of a wheelchair user. But it could be the environment mentally between our own two ears. It could be the environment legally or socially or culturally. It's fundamentally, I believe in people. And every one of us as people have diverse abilities. When we understand that diversity of ability and work to create more inclusive, empowering, enabling environments, we really strike at the core of what it is to be human. By focusing on creating more inclusive environments, what we actually create is belonging. We build trust, we garner respect, we enable contribution, and both add and receive value. As a society and as businesses, we become powered by focusing on inclusion. At different times, my life is evidence of diverse abilities. My story is your story, written in different words, and I'd like to let you in on just 3 little parts of that story. The first part is the story of 2 teachers. If you cast your memory back to when you were a kid, you were probably quite like me. I grew up in the countryside, about 1 kilometre outside a place called Dunshaughlin. Up at the beginning of the day and going until I passed out at night, I was involved in all kinds of sports, from running to rugby, Gaelic soccer, hurling, tennis, athletics, going to the seaside and the beach during the summers. When I wasn't doing those things, I'd be hopping the fence and going exploring in the field with the dog. And then I entered school, and the phone calls home started. Jack's disruptive. He's causing trouble. He's upsetting the other kids. He's not focusing. For the first couple of years, I was largely sidelined, written off as a problem child. But I actually wasn't a bad kid. The teachers that I experienced in the first couple of years led me to believe that. And they led me to believe I didn't have capacity. And so I behaved in that way. It was later discovered that actually I was severely dyslexic. And that's when I started to meet a different kind of teacher. A teacher that taught me how to learn in a way that I could manage. A teacher that taught me that failure was the first attempt in learning, that I could try, get it wrong, come back and improve. The essence of a growth mindset. Without ever explicitly telling me, that teacher demonstrated to me that life rewards effort. During those years, I went from a position of being 2 years behind my reading age to learning to apply myself and entering the world of Harry Potter. Now, that was big at the time I was growing up, and I went from my dad reading me the books to reading them myself. That second teacher allowed me to enter this world of magic, and now I see it in people everywhere. My challenge to you is to consider, which kind of teacher are you? Which kind of teacher are you in your home life, in your work environment, in the premises that your business might inhabit, or in how you create the physical and social and legal systems that govern the cities and towns in which we live in? Are you enabling or disabling? Are you empowering or disempowering? Are you giving space for people's effort to be rewarded and for their magic to be recognized? The second story I'd like to tell you is of going from a place of inspiration to a place of desperation and back again. As I transitioned through my secondary school years, I had a real love of sport. There was times at which I was severely bullied for different reasons, and if I'm honest, there was times I wasn't the kindest to others as well. Those teenage years are times where we have so many questions about ourselves and we go through all the growing pains. And I did too. Sports played a huge role in my life. Running taught me what it was to be alone with my own thoughts. Rugby taught me what it was to be part of a team and to work towards a shared objective. But I found flow and passion when I discovered windsurfing. And I trained to become a lifeguard and a windsurfing and surfing instructor. And I would spend my summers on the West Coast. I had a graw for Connemara. I grew up speaking Irish in County Meath. And so I found myself holidaying in Connemara, but working in Belmullet in County Mayo in a place called Coláiste Uisce. And I remember on one of the first days down there, my final summer as an instructor, cycling off to the beach after a day's work. I remember leaning my bike up against the sand dunes and strolling out onto the beach. I sat down a short while later, and as I did, I surveyed the scene. I could see footprints in the sand and the sun gently setting over the breaking waves, and I just caught myself in the moment. I think we all catch ourselves sometimes. And I realized for the first time I could remember that I was proud of myself. That idea that life rewards effort had paid off. I had gone from that position of the troublemaking young kid that was frustrated because he couldn't apply himself, to having become quite diligent and applying myself through college, school, to be in a position where I was studying to be a health professional. I was doing a job that I was really excited to spend my summer doing. I was feeling excited about the people I was with down there in the west of Ireland. Probably most importantly, though, I was starting to feel comfortable with myself as a person. 8 weeks later, on the first day of a holiday, with some of my best friends in Portugal, I ran down the beach as I had done so many days that day, that week, that summer. I dived into the water over a wave, not realizing just how shallow the water was. My head collided with the sandbank. And in a moment, I went from a position of being this free, independent young guy with the world at his feet to breaking the fifth vertebrae down in my neck. I felt an electric shock going from the center of my body to the extremities, and my body just went limp. Like the minister alluded to, I had an injury after the age of 18. I had come through the school system and was in college. I had entered what the Navy SEALs call a VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The following morning, when I opened my eyes, I counted 8 screws in the light fitting above my head, then realized my head was in a metal cage with tubes going down my nose and throat, that I was on life support. In the weeks and months after, I was told many times all of the things I would never do again. You will never, you will never. A life of dependence was being painted for me. As I was air ambulanced back to Ireland and went into intensive care in Ireland, I nearly didn't make it, but finally ended up in rehab, the place where I would begin to rebuild. And my first job became to breathe without the aid of a ventilator. Just like a child. I didn't choose this, but I could certainly begin to choose my response. I think we've all faced periods where we ask, why me? And I certainly did as well, but gradually that started to turn to why not me? The reality was that I had 15% muscle function remaining. My shoulders, biceps, and wrists. No finger function or movement from my armpits down. And yet I was 20 years old. Why not me? Was the question that I entertained over the next couple of months. And it allowed me on the most difficult days to take small steps forward whilst dealing with the grief, balancing optimism and reality. What I learned during that time is something that I think all of us learned during the COVID pandemic, and maybe during the toughest times in any one of our lives, is that resilience often doesn't just live within us, it often lives between us. That's why including all people in society makes us more resilient as a whole. For me at that time, the thing that was inspiring me or pulling me forward was this vision to get back to college. I was lying in a hospital bed learning to breathe again, and probably the only person that wasn't surprised when 13 months later, yes, with significant help, I was back living away from home in college. These are the kinds of visions that we should have for people, empowering them in the short term so that they can contribute in the long term. Which brings me to the third story I'd like to tell you. I'm calling it, after the Westport event, which we did a couple of months ago, Dare to Include. It's my call to action to you. The story starts in a boardroom where a meeting was to happen that was about me, but without me. It was on the top floor and there was no lift. I turned up at the building and managed to convince the group to come to the ground floor. I sat opposite men and women in suits as a 20-year-old student. And I said to them, I don't want a handout. All I want is a leg up for a short time so I can stand on my own 2 feet again and contribute. I paid my taxes before and I want to pay my taxes again. I don't want to live a life of dependence, but I do recognize that we are all interdependent. All I'm asking for is an equal opportunity to gain the skills so that I can contribute, so that I can add value, and in return receive value. They said yes. They said yes. And what that taught me was that small keys open very big doors. My question for you today, going away, is what small key do you have that could open a very big door for someone in your community? Is it an internship? Is it a job? Is it making a subtle change so that you can welcome new business into your business? I went back to college and over the years qualified as a health professional. I went on to do several other things and get involved in civic life in a major way. The center of my story has been challenging perceived limitations. Days like today, the DFI enabling organisations to provide employment, Galway Chamber of Commerce, Galway City Partnership, Forum Connemara, all these organisations, and so many of you who are in the audience today. You're challenging perceived limitations. And when you see and are inspired by what one group are capable of, in turn, that inspires you to ask more from yourself as well. Now, in my work as a health professional, a catalyst, facilitator, speaker, I've worked in many environments, from research to hands-on in the community to the corporate world and so many more. And honestly, it hasn't been without its challenges. The challenges continue for me every day in small ways, just as they do for everyone else. However, there's very little that can't be overcome without subtle tweaks in approach. People want an equal opportunity to contribute, to add and receive value. It increases the sense of belonging, purpose, and meaning for everyone. 75% of people who sustain a spinal injury, just like I did, never work again. 75%. These are people that could have been highly skilled. These are people who are incredibly creative, with years of experience and value to add in the workforce. And yet subtle things get in the way. In the disabled field overall, 30% of people work versus over 70% of those in the able-bodied category. Inclusion is fundamentally good for business, and it's good business. The reality is that life can change in a moment for any one of us. What kind of a workplace, community, country would you want to experience if that was the case for you or someone you loved? As businesses, as employers, as decision makers in Galway, you can create that now. Powered by Inclusion is a statement of intent. Galway as a destination and a community has the potential to be a beacon of light for the rest of the country, just like Westport began the journey on a couple of months ago. It's inspiring to me that Galway chooses to be a leader in striving to create environments centered around inclusion, understanding, connection, empathy, and compassion, knowing that there's a way to go yet. Celebrating and becoming inclusive of all abilities, as we said, engenders trust, it builds engagement, belonging, it demands an improvement in communication. But interestingly, it leads to increased retention, greater cohesion. It's good for business, and it connects us to each other in a more human way. Just like nature, it's our diversity that makes us strong. Coming here today, getting involved in whatever way you are, whether this is you dipping the toe for the first time or you've been in this world for a while, you've had the bravery to begin. Now I wish you the courage to continue the journey as together your teams, your organizations, your premises, your businesses become powered by inclusion. Thanks very much and have a great day.
All I can say is, wow. I have listened to many speeches, Jack, over the years, and that's one of the most powerful and I think one of the most leveling and emotional that we have heard, and it's a real lived experience. Are you enabling or disabling? Are you empowering or dispowering? Are you enabling the magic? I think they're the key bits, and there's so many profound parts to that speech in terms of the lived experience, but I really love the analogy of small keys can open very big doors sometimes, and it's about asking and it's about doing. So listen, Jack, we're going to take a couple of moments to absorb what you've said. We're going to have a short break here while we rearrange the stage and get ready for the first of 3 really interactive short panel discussions, bringing all of this to life in terms of some of the lived experiences of employers, employees, and where they are on the journey. So for those of you online, if you bear with us for a couple of moments while we just rearrange the stage, and for those present, you can grab a quick coffee or a cup of tea. All right, we'll be back in a moment. you can give me some juice. Now, folks, hopefully you've got enough caffeine at this stage if you take your places again. Yeah. So, is there anything you need to show them on the...
That's it on?
Make sure you hand up your note just because I can't hold it down here. Why is it they're all on. I control all that, so don't worry.
Now, okay. We're good to go? Excellent. So let's start with, tell us a bit about you and your role. All right, so just, yep. Okay, folks. We'll get the last few filling up their coffees, just have a seat, and we'll roll. Great, so listen, after our first three speakers, we certainly have plenty food for thought and nurture for the imagination. We're now going to move to our first panel discussion, and I am delighted to welcome from the outside working in, Maria Gannon, who's a member of the employer engagement team based at the Department of Social Protection, known to many of us as Intro, I always struggle in terms of the correct pronunciation, in Galway City. Then we have Kathy Keane. Kathy is the project worker with Forum Connemara, which is the rural development partnership company comprised of voluntary, community and statutory bodies. And I know Kathy will give us a greater sense of the organisation and its broad reach. We have Pierce Richardson. Pierce works for the Disability Federation of Ireland and provides best-in-class advice, support and professional guidance to businesses looking to create policies and strategies to establish accessible workplaces. And we certainly have been doing quite a bit of work with Pierce over the last few months, and it's been really enlightening to I think, build on and leverage his experience and knowledge of the industry. And then last but certainly not least, we have Sharon Doyle. Sharon is the Employer Liaison Officer for the Inclusive Pathways to Employment project, which we talked to, and this is the project that's been set up by Galway City Partnership and in conjunction with ourselves in the Chamber. So I'd like a boulabus to welcome our panellists to the stage. Lovely. And Maria, I might start with yourself, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Just talk to us. So what I'm going to ask the panellists to do just for about 2 minutes each is just give us a little deeper sense of the organisation and the specific role they're doing, because there's actually, they're really complementary, but there's quite a number of unique aspects to each person's role as well. So Maria, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Kenny. My name is Maria Gannon. Sorry, before I start, I just have a little bit of difficulty hearing in this ear, so if I do ask you to repeat a question later on, please forgive me, that's all it is. But my name is Maria Gannon, and I'm part of the team with the Employer Engagement Intro here in Galway City. We have a few functions. We do recruitment with the employers, so we have a Jobs Ireland website, which is our recruitment website, and we also deal with financial supports. At the moment, the live register is quite low, so there is difficulty with recruitment. So in general, it's across the board. But we do have financial incentives, such as Jobs Plus for people recruiting from the live register. But we also have quite a few grants available for employers who support people or employ people with disabilities. These grants are underused. They're not utilised enough. They need to be utilised a bit more, and that's why it's fantastic we are here today. It is just to get this knowledge out there and get the applications in. Myself and my colleagues, we do the administration side of the applications. It is Employability Galway, which I've been working with for the last 10 years, and now Sharon has come on board as well, and Lisa. They are brilliant. They will be fantastic working with employers, going through the application forms, getting the supporting documentation to apply for these grants, to make it easy. The applications, there is quite a bit of paperwork in them, but it is good because, as Jack alluded to earlier on, you need the knowledge. So an employer needs the knowledge. They need to know the disability and how it will, how can they support them? And if they have this knowledge, they can support the employee into the workplace, into the job. I think in the last 10 years I have been doing it, that has been probably a little bit of a shortfall. And I know Pierce has the disability awareness, which is brilliant because that's definitely underused, that grant, to bring for the employers, just to give them an understanding that, they're as able as anybody else, and sometimes better. They are fantastic, people with disabilities, and like that, over 18, as a minister alluded to, that they had been in college. We're perfect. And Jack, it was perfect. And as Jack said as well, you need to have this knowledge so you can make it work. So we do have the finance, and there's quite a few of them, for if there's workplace adaptation grants, so if there's equipment that you need to upgrade that will help the person with a disability, go for it. They're all on our little booklet here. They're also online at gov.ie. Use it. And use the facilities of Sharon and Lisa and Employability Galway. They are there to help, and they are there to, I will do the administration and I'll help as much as I can, but these guys are fantastic on the ground liaison and bringing it all together. So that is...
Your key recommendation, so, is bring the booklet and enjoy a coffee and absorb it a little more.
And absorb it a little more.
Brilliant.
And, just familiarise yourself. I know with the departments we can have, it seems complicated, the application forms, but I suppose when you're filling it out, you kind of get a better understanding. You do get it better because you have to put thought into it, and you have to, when the application comes to me, I'm not a medical expert, and I certainly am not a disabilities expert either, but if the documentation is there and I go and meet, I have the knowledge. I know, okay, this is why they're making this application, and this is why the employer needs it. And when I have this documentation, it's easy.
Great.
No.
End on those 2 words, it's easy.
Easy.
Kathy, from your point of view.
Hello. You're keeping us very much to time, Kenny. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Kathy Kane, and I'm a project worker on the Want to Work programme, together with my colleagues Yvonne and Lisa Kane. I always feel like with the Beverley sisters, the 3 Kanes. But I'm here today to talk to you about our programme, and we actually were an ability project, and we were working over 3 years, roughly, supporting young people with disabilities in the Connemara, the whole of Connemara. And we then, last year, were fortunate enough to get some dormant account funding and managed to set up a programme called we call Want to Work. And this really continues the work that we did in Ability, and that is to support people with disabilities or mental health conditions into education, training and employment, and some volunteering opportunities that are available within our area. Now, there are 2 strands to our project, and the first of which is about engaging and supporting our participants. And we offer them both formal and informal training. So we have kind of a core employment skills training program, and we do the usual things like manual handling, COVID induction, health and safety. And then we develop bespoke training programs, and that is more about looking at the world of work and how can our participants interact in the world of work. And this is a program that's been developed by our team. And then finally, we have the industry-based training, so things like SafePass, First Aid and HACCP. Depending on what our participants' interests and industry they might like to go into, we facilitate that as part of the funding that we have. Secondly, we have a core employment skills training work experience placements, and we've got a number of fantastic partners in our local area who are facilitating these placements currently, actually. We've Connemara Community Radio, we've Kylemore Abbey, we've Clifton Town Hall, we've Clan Family Resource Centre, and the Wild Goat Cafe, so just to name a few. And this is really an opportunity for our participants to really experience perhaps the field that they want to go into in a very caring and supportive way. And should they wish to pursue that, we have a third aspect to the programme, which is job coaching, where we go in a little bit deeper and we explore with them what is actually involved in that particular job and how can they get or go to and move forward in the direction that they want to go. So we basically develop a plan, and then the idea is at the end of our program that we will be able to facilitate, perhaps with local employers, some opportunities within the area to work. So that's the essence of our program. But just the final thing, Kenny, before you switch me off, we do of course work with yourselves, employers. I mean, you're key. You are absolutely key to the next piece. I can do with my colleagues all the work I can do, but without actual jobs, that key, as Jack said, giving somebody an opportunity. Let's work together to try and give them that opportunity. Thank you.
Lovely, Cathy, and I love the variety. I love when you talk to the work experience program, the brands, some of them would be well known to many of us, but it's different types of businesses. It's not any one business. There's opportunities for all types of employers to get involved in this, and I think that's the core messaging. Pierce, I'm going to skip you for a second, as I think you tie it all nicely together, and just come to Sharon. Sharon, from your perspective.
Hi, my name is Sharon, and I'm working in a project called Inclusive Pathways to Employment. It's a Pobble and Dormant funded project set up through Galway City Partnership in conjunction with Galway Chamber. We're a small project, we're a two-part project. Myself, I'm the Employer Liaison Officer, so I help support, train and advise employers of the grants that are available out there and try to open as many doors in as many areas. As Jack said earlier, everyone is quite capable, and we just want to open as many doors, and I will be there for the employer the whole time to advise and help them in an ongoing basis. My colleague Lisa is fantastic at employment support, where she deals with the clients that come into us who might have been experiencing challenges due to the difficulties, either mentally or physical, that they are suffering throughout their lives. So they might have experienced challenges going forward into employment. So she kind of organises a progression chart with them. So they might want to do a course. They might just be a little bit anxious and need some social interaction with other people. And she's doing fantastic work supporting them and developing them so that when they're ready to meet me, they're a little bit more confident in proceeding forward. So as Jack said earlier, and he's an awful hard act to follow, we really do need keys for more employers and more doors to open for us. And I will be there to support and advise and guide them on the way.
Lovely, thank you, Sharon. I think what's key in that is it's a holistic, it's an overall package. It's not just one particular prong. There's lots of parts to it. And I think nicely tying into yourself, Pierce, the work that you've been doing with Sharon, with Lisa, and indeed others has been a key enabler to that. Talk to us a little more in terms of the work that you're doing in DFI.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Pierce Richardson. And what I do is I like to think I come in like maybe 2 steps before everybody else. So I try and work with employers to try and put, I keep saying policies and procedures in place, but it's about trying to take the awkwardness out of it for everybody, so that when the person who is eventually comes in and takes up the position, the experience is good from both the employer and the person themselves. So that includes talking about a commitment and what's involved in that commitment, from senior management right down to the person who's actually going to be working beside the person with disabilities. And that work takes time. I always say it's not it's a progress rather than I asked them to concentrate on progress rather than trying to get it right first time, because we will all make mistakes. So it's about trying to put those steps in place. And it's a continuous kind of improvement model, so you kind of are looking at it, see what's working, see what doesn't work, and change it. So I talk about things like recruitment processes, because any one part of the recruitment process is inaccessible, the whole thing is inaccessible. I talk about reasonable accommodations, I talk about onboarding, I talk about I do disability awareness training. I can come in and do some, I was mentioned twice already this morning, people hate that word audit, but I can come in and do an audit and an access audit, and within that audit then, like, you'd have medium, small and long-term goals within that, and some of them are quite easy to do, some of them are long-term and take a little bit more work. But at least people would have a plan. So it's about benchmarking where they are currently, where they want to go, and put this plan in place. So that's what my role is, come in. Some organisations might need me to lean in a lot, and that's fine. And some people might just need a small bit of advice and guidance, and I'm here to do both. So I think, I think that kind of complements what everybody else does here. It kind of overlaps, but at the same time, I like to think I'm in there hopefully a couple of steps beforehand. Like, for example, tomorrow I'm doing some disability awareness training with the Clayton Hotel. I'm doing 2 sessions, one with the staff and then one with the management, 2 slightly different approaches to it. I've done some training with Sharon previously with other organisations within Galway, so yeah, we're working through it, and the idea is to have people, we talk about having people with disabilities job ready, but we're looking at getting employers ready as well.
I think that's one of the key things, and if you look at the training session that Sharon, Pierce and Lisa did a couple of weeks ago, I think there were 23 people from about 11 companies through that training. It was an online session. It was really, really powerful. And Clayton tomorrow is another example where there's bespoke on site. And I think the key thing is, as you're representing organisations, or you go back and you talk to your network, because there's many people who aren't here today who will get value from this. Talk to your network and say, gosh, there is actual funding and support available, really interactive, to come in and try and help you demystify this or remove the barriers. And Pierce, I'm going to just come back to you with a question in terms of, there's real barriers clearly, and we know that, but then there's also the mindset that there's barriers, but there's actually not. Have you maybe an example in the past where you came on an organisation and they were, we can't do this because of X, Y, and Z, but you actually were able just to work through it and the barriers can easily be broken down?
Yes. I had a lady from a hotel from County Waterford. She rang in an awful panic. She just, one of her people who work, she was actually a girl who went in and cleaned the rooms, and she had given her a couple of different warnings because the girl wasn't checking in and checking out. And as it turned out, the girl couldn't read or write, and she was there for a couple of years, and she was in an awful panic. The first thing I said to her is, just relax, I'm here to help. And I talked her through what the different options are and our obligations, and we were able to resolve that issue for them. And that's one of the points we haven't touched on yet. I think if employers think they don't have anybody with disabilities working for them, I think again, because when you consider like 13.5% of the population have a disability in Ireland, there's bound to be somebody somewhere who has some sort of a disability. So I just want to make that point.
I think it's a key thing. Sometimes we perceive disability because you physically can see something different about someone, but a lot of disability is hidden in so many different ways. And that's been the huge learning experience that we've had as a result of this Inclusive Pathways to Employment project. I think, Maria, just coming back to you in terms of, and I know you talked to some of the supports that are there, but in terms of the training, what type of training do employers sometimes require, or what type of supports are there, just to give us maybe 1 or 2 lived examples that you've had briefly?
Okay, so I suppose the most utilised grant that we have would be the wage subsidy scheme. The wage subsidy scheme is there for employers who employ people with disabilities. The disability may be that the person has a productivity shortfall. So you may have 2 employees there, one has a disability and may take a little bit longer to carry out his daily tasks, or may need a little bit more supervision, but can perfectly well do the job, but might take that little bit longer. The wage subsidy is there. It's a grant that's paid per hour to the employer to recruit this individual. That is the most utilised one we have at the moment. We've over 200 employees on the wage subsidy in Galway City and County. Another one that's really popular as well would be the Workplace Adaptation Grant. So that is, if you have a person and you've discovered they may have a disability, and it could be, like myself at the moment, a hearing, might have a hearing, and their computer, they may need to, or their phone, they may need to get an amplifier and their phone. We can help with that. We're there to help with that. There may be another one that their site, there could be deterioration in the site, and their computer, so they may need software for their computer, such as the Clause software or things like that. We can help with that. There's the application form, and they're 2 of the most popular ones. The Disability Awareness Grant is there. Like that, it's not utilised enough. With all our, I just have to put this out there, Kenny, with all our applications, put the application in first, wait for an answer, and then proceed with the training or the equipment that needs. Always get the application form into us first and get approval on it. And once that's there, that's fine.
Excellent, that's great advice. I always think the real examples, people can relate to them. And Kathy, to that point, I'm going to put you on the spot, which you'll love. Without identifying anyone, in terms of the people you've placed or the clients you've worked with so far, Give us a scenario that you're most proud of.
That's easy.
Okay.
Well, it's funny, we were
Use
talking
your
about it on the
microphone.
way- Oh, sorry.
We've an online audience to cater.
I'm so used to talking with a microphone. We actually were talking about it on the way in. Me personally, I was working with a young man who basically was a recluse. And my first encounter with him, he was actually in his bedroom. And my first conversation was up his stairway. And gradually, with time, he actually came down and began to meet with my other colleague. And we began to explore where he wanted to go and what were the challenges and obstacles he was facing and how could we perhaps tackle them. And the first thing we began to look at was his interest, because our program is very much person-centered. It's about going where the person goes and following them and just kind of basically helping them smooth the path. And actually, he solved his own problem. If you actually listen to somebody who has a disability, they will tell you what they need, you know, and you just have to follow and support. And he was actually interested in learning how to dry stone wool. And we're very blessed with plenty of dry stone wools in Connemara and indeed County Galway. And he began to follow a local stonemason online. And he asked me, is there any possibility that he could actually learn how to do some dry stone walling? So that's what we did. He, together with another participant who actually had a farm, we spoke to their family and we engaged the stonemason. And he is a most amazing man, huge experience. He just gets it. He just gets how to work with young people and people with disabilities. And they proceeded to build a wall. And it was like the Great Wall of China. And so we facilitated that. How do we facilitate that? We provided them with stone. We bought some stone, as advised by our stonemason. We bought equipment, and we had the land, and we made sure that all the right insurances were in place, and away they went, and they built a wall. And this guy, there is lots of tales to this. Other people have got involved. But just to say, from those conversations up the stairs, that young man is now working with the stonemason that we engaged. He's working 2 days a week. And that, to me, is a huge achievement, because I think where he would still be up the stairs if somebody hadn't got involved with his life and helped him.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. And that actually wasn't a placed question. That was a random question that I thought I'd throw at Kathy, so thank you for that example. Sharon, in the last 30 seconds, what first step would employers need to take if they wanted to begin this journey today?
I think the first step today is, well, basically, if you can come down to our desk and sign up with us and give me email details, that would be fantastic. That would make life easier for me. But even just to get in touch with me, to pick up my card, to reach out to me, and just so I can give you some insight into the project, so that basically all I want to do is a little bit of commitment, so that when you have a position available or a vacancy in your company, that if we have a client that would be suitable for the role, that when I forward it, that it will be considered, that they will be one of the candidates that you will consider. That I don't want it to, I don't kind of like the word disability. I prefer you just to look at their ability, to look at their past experience, to look at courses they might be doing within themselves, and to acknowledge the fact that it takes a lot of courage to come forward, especially when you might have been on the sidelines for so long, and to acknowledge that as well as part of it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Listen, thank you to our first round of panellists. The deeper you want to go in conversation with them, the beauty is they're around here this evening, but I just want to thank Pierce, Maria, Kathy and Sharon for their time, and thank you. And then we're going to call our next duo discussion to the stage, being Carmel Creven and Damien Manning. So if you just bear with us online and indeed present, and we just slightly arrange the stage, and we'll have the next conversations. Now, great, thanks Kevin. Now, folks. Lovely. Yeah. So we're good to it? Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So our next discussion moves to very much the lived experience from a point of view of an employee and indeed an employer. And I'd first of all like to welcome our two speakers on this, Carmel Creevan. I know Carmel is going to talk a little more to herself. She's a native of Galway and was involved in an accident during a rugby match in 2017, resulting in a physical disability. And then also Damien Manning. Damien, someone I know from about 20 years ago in a previous experience. Damien is the owner and operator of Head Salon, a hairdressing salon in Clifton. And he has the experience of being an employer. And for the dynamic for this conversation, as opposed to Q&A, but we will welcome questions, I'm going to ask Carmel to come to the podium first, and Carmel's going to talk to you in terms of her lived experience. So Carmel, thank you and welcome.
Hello everybody, my name is Carmel Craven and I'm here today to talk about my employment journey. To begin with, before my accident, I led a very active life. I had many hobbies and pastimes and was a winger on my local rugby and soccer teams, and also had a very active social life. I was also part of the Irish Defence Forces. Life was going good. In 2017, my life was changed after having a spinal injury while playing a rugby match. I ended up paralysed from the chest down. I needed intensive rehab to regain movement again. This was the most difficult moments of my life. I spent 8 months in 3 different hospitals. 2 of those hospitals were here in Galway. Afterwards, I was transferred to the NRH in Dunleary for 3 months, where I had to do intensive rehab to learn to walk again. After leaving the NRH, I had to rebuild my life one step at a time. After my discharge from the NRH, and while coming to terms with my spinal injury, I started to research courses that I could partake in that suited my injury. I wanted to give back and help people with physical and non-physical disabilities, as I saw a lack of physical disability personal trainers when I needed help through my recovery. So I enrolled in a personal trainer course in GTI in Galway, where I specialised in nutrition and focused my new skills on helping people with disabilities, and also taken part in various courses with Cara Sport Ireland. The Irish Wheelchair Association Ability Programme Galway helped me find suitable courses. Through college, I did my work experience in my local gym, HQ Gym, where my employer, Dominic McGlinchey, was very supportive and offered me a part-time job as a physical disability personal trainer. The employment was set up through the support from Mary Hibbett, Applyability Galway, and Brendan Monaghan, Welfare Tume. To summarise, I was an outgoing, active person. My accident has changed me physically and mentally, but I have regained my independence and my outlook on a bright future as a PT for people with different disabilities. I am not the same person now. I feel life has changed me for the better. It has moulded me into a stronger individual that wants to give back to others. My experience from an employment point of view, I value my job, my work colleagues, and most of all, the individual I can help and inspire by giving them hope to encourage them to follow their dreams. I would encourage employers to be open to employing individuals with disabilities and look at their abilities and not their disabilities. Thank you.
Well done, Carmel.
Can I ask, given the lived experience that you've had over the last while, you know the way we're always looking at things and thinking and saying they should do this or we should do that, what would you think employers could do more to I suppose, make employment more accessible for all? Is there anything that you think from your lived experience you'd change?
I think employers should always give a person with a disability a chance, because we're all the same at the end of the day. It's about your ability, and it doesn't matter how a person looks, everyone deserves a chance.
Brilliant. No, listen, very well said, and thank you so much.
Okay,
So, Daniel, if we call you to the stage.
Hello everybody, my name's Damien Manning, and as is mentioned earlier, I'm the owner of Head's Hairdressing Salon in Clifton. I also wear another hat, and that is as educator within Head's Hairdressing Academy. And it was through the academy that Forum approached me to tailor-make a bespoke training program for a participant that was interested in hairdressing. And that was absolutely brilliant for me, because what we were able to do in that time was to develop a way in which we could allow the participant to have her disability and yet acquire training and skills necessary to do the job when she emerged into the workforce. So what that enabled was that we found out that after there was a threshold upon which the participant could stay standing, and very often she'd bull on regardless and then be flatlined as a consequence. So that was no good for her, and also for potential employers. So we were able to identify at what point, okay, here we are, and if you take a break after, say, 2 hours of standing, and you factor that into a 6 or 8 hour working day, that you can have these intervals, and then you can work your way throughout the day and manage with your disability to do the job the same as anyone else. The other lovely thing about being an educator in a profession like hairdressing is that you see somebody coming in the door with a wee spark in their eye that they want to do this job. Well, with every skill that is achieved in our program as we developed it, that spark grew and grew and grew and became a flame, a burning flame of ambition within an industry that she had her hands on it now. She has the ability within herself, and you can see that grow in a person. Oh my God, the satisfaction you get when you see somebody walking in the door and they're shy like this, and before long they're holding the door open for somebody to say, come on, come on, come on, follow me. Come on into this here profession now. So that's the beautiful thing that I had in the teaching end of it. And then I put on this other hat, whoops. Us hairdressers talk with our hands as well. So when I put on this other hat of being an employer, the supports that there are available, I know we've heard it here before, but just to give you a practical example, the supports are phenomenal. It worked out pretty clearly that because the participant had hearing difficulties as well as some physical ailments, it meant that the phone and the receiving of telephone calls, the point of sale aspect of the reception, flagged itself as being a difficult area. So, as an employer, what do? Do you say, oh, right, we'll keep her away from the reception then? Or do you embrace this and say, here's a chance for us to develop this environment to include you in it so that you can develop the essential reception skills, point of sale skills, interpersonal skills, and be a great ambassador for my salon before anybody ever walks in the door. If they listen to you on the phone, then they're like, oh, I can't wait to meet Lorraine. She sounds lovely, or whoever it is that's there. So we have worked on issues like this that have come up. We tried a different phone system, for example. Through the Ability Programme, we were able to get another phone in and try that. Unfortunately, it rang really loud, but you would have heard it from across the street, so it wasn't really a practical solution for everybody that was wanting to be in a relaxing salon environment. So we are still working towards engaging technology in the workforce to better facilitate people with a range of abilities, so that technology can be a driving force forward within the working environment to allow more people into our environment. And can I tell you, in the salon environment and in the work environment, the enthusiasm and the love for the job that this participant now has in our environment makes her not just an essential part of the team, it makes her a cornerstone in that salon environment. She is a person that adds to all of our day by being there. So for anybody that's out there and considering becoming an employer or getting involved in the process, because it is a process, like Pierce said, in which we interact with the participant to find out how we can best facilitate in this environment, and also to avail of the services and supports that there are available, because it's great.
Damien, question in 30 seconds, because we could listen to you all day, and it's really exemplary, the passion that you have for this, and I think the lived experience has been really positive. Talk to us about the engagement with Forum and just the paperwork. Was it a burden? Were you helped through it?
Paperwork is something I'd usually run a mile from. Let me say that at the start. I'm a creative individual. It has been made very easy for me to engage, because there's a person on the other end of the phone at the start, in the middle, and all the way through this process. Also, to engage in person with Yvonne was the particular caseworker there who would come and would assess the working environment, see how it's going, and provide supports. So in a real-time setting, it's there. It's not one of these numbers you get where you're on the phone for ages trying to get through to somebody or anything like that. No. And there isn't anything too small. If it was to do with filling in paperwork, which isn't my favourite thing, they're there to help. So it made it very easy for me to be involved. And I would encourage anyone here to really, really get involved.
Lovely. Listen, thank you so much, Damien.
Thank you very much.
To Damien and to Carmel, thank you so much for your time and participation. Anyone, any questions for Damien and Carmel? We'll give an opportunity at the end, but just while they're here, any questions from the audience? Or Kevin, have we got anything online that the lads are, I know, keeping an eye? No, well, listen, thank you both folks brilliantly, and we'll call our last panellist to the stage now, and thank you so much. The lived experience is brilliant. In terms of the team and prep for today, was to give a sense of the range of organisations, the range of supports and the range of perspectives. And I think so far we've managed to just be able to talk and bring you on that journey. And our last panel discussion is no different. I'd like to welcome to the stage Helen Gavin, if I start from the outside working in. Helen is CEO of Bullcraft Marketing and indeed President of Westport Chamber of Commerce. And you will have heard discussion about Jack talking about Westport Chamber of Commerce and the initial event that took place on this topic last year in Mayo. Then we have James O'Doherty. James has worked in the medtech sector, but also with Rehab Group in strategic programme and funding development for quite a period of time, so we'll hear more from James. We then have Roisin McDonough. Roisin is the employment facilitator with Employability Galway. Roisin will talk to us a little more on that. And then we have Mary Finn. Many of you will know Mary around Galway City from Connected for Work, which Mary will give a far better sense of it herself, but part of it is helping employers, working with employers in terms of creating the right workplace environment for employees, but also then helping sustain and the long-term aspect to their employment. So really looking forward to this final discussion. And I think first of all, if I start with yourself, Helen, just give us, in the same way as before, a little sense of yourself and the event that you had last year in Mayo and what the follow-on has been to it since. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's absolutely brilliant to be here, isn't it, in person, and actually being able to shake hands with people and use one of those 8 senses that we all have. So my name is Helen Gavin. I am the president of Westport Chamber of Commerce, and I run a digital marketing agency based in Westport. And I suppose just prior to COVID, lots of discussions happened within the chamber around building a more inclusive community in Westport, and not just from an employer's perspective, but employees around Westport town as well, and how accessible we are or we aren't. And like everything, you know, it's a process as well in terms of building change and creating change and improving things. And it all started with conversations with James O'Doherty, who's here with us today, and Michael Lennon and a number of people. And it sort of developed into, it's a conversation. If we can start and talk about things and actually realise that these issues are there, and it's a scary conversation to have, you know, you don't want to offend anybody and you don't want to say the wrong thing, but ignoring it doesn't make it any better, do you know? So if we can start and have the conversation then, and particularly with employers, then we can sort of come up with solutions. And so from, I suppose, that sort of thought process, the Dare to Include event was brought together last November, and it's very much like this event. We had so many stakeholders: Disability Federation Ireland, we had Westport Chamber members, Westport Chamber, we had Mayo North East, Mayo South East, lots and lots of different organisations. And I suppose there was 3 key themes to the event, which was workplace challenges, inclusive hospitality, and the built environment. And the event was a huge success. And you know, I was speaking to a few people this morning, and we were talking about, you know, we're already on this path, and it all sounds great. But you know, when we leave here today, we all have a job to do. You know, we all leave with this great feeling of, oh, we're doing something really brilliant. But then when we go away and we go back into our organisations, it's so easy to fall back into the same sort of day-to-day. And for me here today, I would really appeal to employers, anybody from any of these organisations, to really reach out, really, you know, if you take from one thing from today, seek ways to improve your learning in the space, because I suppose for me, that's one of the great things to be here today. It's reigniting in me what was there, you know, when we ran the Dare to Include event. That, you know, we need to learn more and continue to learn more and implement small little practices into our everyday work environments. And for me, whether it's adding a line at the end of my recruitment advert that I'm an equal opportunities employer, or whether it's that when I go to interview somebody, I ask the question, do you have any special assistive or special assistance that I can offer to make the interview process more easier for you? And there's so many things. Our menus, you know, if we're in a restaurant, our websites, you know, is our fonts okay? Is our website suitable to be integrated with assistive technology? There's so many different ways, and sorry, I'm probably going on far too long, but there's so many different ways that we can implement small and simple practices into our lives. So I suppose for me, to say to you guys leaving here today, just take 1 or 2 things, just do small things. We climbed Croagh Patrick on Saturday down in Mayo. It was absolutely amazing. And somebody said, how do you eat an elephant? And it's 1 bite at a time. And I think that's really what I would encourage all of you to do today. Just take something small, and whether you're an employee or working for one of the amazing organisations that support employees, you know, really do push the boundaries.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's don't wait for perfection, just start the process. James, from a point of view of yourself, you're obviously involved in this event, but obviously from your background as well, and your work even through the LCDC, I see with Mayo County Council, etc. There's a multidisciplinary perspective from where you're coming from. Do you want to talk to us a little on that?
Thank you, and I'm glad you put it like that, multidisciplinary, because this is one of the points that I wanted to bring out.
Oh, good.
And this is not a set-up question either, obviously, Kenny. A couple of points, because you've asked me to speak about Hospitality Inc., but before I get there, I'd just like to talk about the whole idea of inclusive hospitality, because Westport is going to be the flagship in Ireland for inclusive hospitality. We've been on the journey for a number of years there. I worked with the rehab group up until last December, but my wife for 10 years ran a restaurant in Westport, so I have some understanding of the challenges. Agus nish Tommy in a goni Iras book because my wife is working out in the Screeb House. So we're still much involved in hospitality, and the only reason I bring it up is to say that we have some personal experience of working both in employing people within the hospitality sector and catering for people within the hospitality sector who have diverse needs coming into us. Within Westport, our hospitality sector, our tourism sector is represented by Destination Westport. Helen mentioned Michael Lennon, who was the former president of the Irish Hotels Federation. And Michael has been driving us to consider how we address inclusive hospitality. And it's a challenge in a heritage town like Westport. It's a challenge here. Your mayor talked about it in a town like Galway, because we're all towns. Our buildings are not built for access, and they're small, and they're heritage buildings, so you can't just simply make modifications. You have to put a lot of thought into how you do it. One of the things that we've done in Westport, and we weren't successful under the chamber, we tried to do it, but our SICAP provider came in and funded a mobility audit that we carried out with an OT for the whole town. We recognise that the local authority has a huge role to play, and we have engaged with the local authority to make them aware of what we would like to see, really, if you like, joined up thinking about any development that takes into account accessibility. That's why in our Dare to Include event, we had the county architect talking, because we were talking about the built environment. It's all very well to get your thinking right in it, but if people can't access you, then you can't engage with them. And the final point then is about how do we change our own mindset. I'd prompted Helen to say it, but she didn't, so I'll say it. Because the Chamber was involved in the Hospitality Inc. as a sponsor, we had access to the disability awareness training through DFI and through rehab. And I think Westport Chamber is the first Chamber of Commerce in Ireland where our committee has taken the training in disability awareness, recruitment and retention training. Hospitality Inc., then I'll finish on this one if I can get it in with what you asked me to talk about, was funded under this same programme, Pathways to Employment. It's a partnership led by the rehab group, because the disability group has to be the lead in it. Mayo Sligo Leitrim ETB came on board to fund the training element under what's called STP, Specialist Training Provision. Westport Chamber, Destination Westport, Irish Hotels Federation, and there was one or two other organisations, Westport Tourism, supported the application and came on board as partners. And we were running the programme, training 12 people in 2 cohorts, so 24 people overall. And it's been run in the Leeson Centre, which is a social enterprise run by Westport Chamber and Mayo County Council in Westport.
It's phenomenal when you look and you listen to all the brands and you listen to the different arms of the state that are involved, and you're talking about SICAP funding and all different pots of funding that are there. And it's getting, as we talked earlier, and the theme has been the language, but it's also getting to understand the different funding pots and how you can utilise them both as organisations and as employers. Roisin, from a point of view of employability, talk to us a little more. And also, I know there's one item that we're to touch on here, and it's the value of technology and how that can interplay as well in terms of how we get better, I think, in this. But Roisin, from an employability perspective.
Yeah, I work for Employability Galway. We are the Department of Social Protection funded service for job seekers with disabilities and mental health issues in Galway City and County. We've been on the go now for 21 years. I've been doing it for 13 years myself. And Mary here beside me was involved as well before that. We would work with people that have intellectual learning, physical, sensory, mental health difficulties. those recovering from accident and injuries. We would work with people across the board, from early school leavers right up to people that would have masters and PhDs. What that means for employers is that we have a wide and diverse database of job seekers. And I think what's very important, what has come across to me here today from listening to Carmel and listening to Jack, is no one wants a handout. No one wants to get a job because they have a disability. Everybody has skills and abilities, and our job is to help people identify those skills and abilities and to match them up with employers that are looking for those skills and abilities. Because the key to any successful employment is to find out what a person is good at and to employ them to do that. So our role with employers is we will have extensively profiled all our job seekers to identify any technology that might be needed, any access needs. And then we would work with an employer to facilitate the employment, to help people get settled into the workplace, to help with on-site training, to help with, we can help set up the job essentially. And we help them, we would work with the likes of Marie from Intro to set up any grants that are needed so that the onus isn't on the employer, that we take that pressure from them. You mentioned technology there. Technology is very important for some of our job seekers in terms of assistive technology for people that are visually impaired and people with hearing difficulties. We'd also look at access requirements in terms of buildings and things. But a huge range of our job seekers would have hidden disabilities as well. It could be mental health difficulties where they haven't, there's no onus on somebody to disclose a disability to an employer. So we would support a lot of people in the background as well. And we would help people, we would have worked a lot. I think another thing that has come across strongly for me today as well is the need for access to training. And it's something that we would have been given out about for years. And it's something we fought for, and we would have worked a lot with the Ability Project and Forum because they filled a real gap that was there, because Damien as an employer mentioned how important it was to come in and to be able to provide the training for somebody with a disability. Carmel spoke about working with the IWA Ability Project to access the training that she needed, and Jack spoke about being part of that conversation. So to me that shows the importance of people getting, you know, people acknowledging the ability they have and giving them the access to the training that they need so that they can progress into employment, and that the likes of us can to support them in employment, and that the likes of Mary can step in and sustain the employment then.
It's really powerful when you talk to it that way, and I love the segue into Mary. And before I come to you, Mary, just I think one of the questions that we were looking at here is, do employers already have people who suffer from disabilities? And I think, to be fair, from the themes and the conversation we have this morning is yes. And I think it's interesting, even in the project that we're working on, at the Inclusive Pathways to Employment project, you know, language has come up, and we're learning about, certainly through the chamber, and James, you're right, you were ahead of us. We're playing catch up in terms of trying, and I think it's trying to get this at a national level onto the platform for business groups in general, but conversations about social agoraphobia and neurodiversity and those type of terms are totally new on me, and I think we're all learning as we go. And Mary, from your point of view, and I think the sustainment piece is critical, talk to us, I suppose, about your lived experience and what you've observed and what you'd like to share with this group of prospective employees, prospective employers, both here and online.
Thanks, Kenny. Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Finn. Connect for Work is my company. My stand is over there. So please, if you have any questions afterwards and you want to have a chat further with me, love to talk to you. So in relation to my lived experience, I've been working in the disability sector for about 20 years. Have worked in National Learning Network, Rehab Care, worked with James on a programme, worked in employability for 7 years, and left it in the capable hands of Roisin when I was moving on. And from my experience working on the project with where James was, I established Connect for Work. And it really came from looking and speaking to people who had been in employment and were away and absent from their jobs through illness, injury, or lots of other reasons, you know, even extending to people coming back after maternity leave and trying to make that transition back to work, and just finding it really difficult, didn't know where to start, didn't know, I can ask this question, or even the employers themselves. I had one employer ring me and he said, I don't know what to say to this girl, you know, she's worked with me for years, but I don't know what to say to her. So I said, well, let's just say by what can we do for you? You know, somebody said earlier on, I can't remember, one of the other panelists said, you know, a person who has a disability or a challenge or a need, they know best what they need. They just might not always be able to verbalize it or put into a framework of work. So I work with employers and employees who are either in work at risk of an absence because maybe something's coming up, maybe they're facing into surgery, or they're facing into taking time off to care for a loved member of the family, or they're actually coming back after their own absence. So we put a plan together to support that person. So it's all about reasonable accommodations. And I'll just share one example, if I can, very briefly. So I worked with a lady late last year who was coming back after a 4-year absence. Now, most people think 4 years, you know, are they ever going to come back? But this employer was very supportive. So she was coming back. She had acquired a visual impairment, and she really didn't know how she was going to come back because her job involved reading through voluminous documents. It was very legal, very technical, and I would hate to be doing her job. But that was her job, and she loved it. She wanted to get back to it. So we got all the Microsoft accessibility features. I got her training on that, and we also got software, and we worked through NRBI. But I said to her manager, I said, you know, this is going to make a huge difference to this individual as she comes back. But I said, what about the rest of the team? They all have to still read these documents. Can you not make this software available to the entire team and make it inclusive and easier for everyone to do their job? And she said, God, I never thought of that. So not only do I always try to work with an individual and their employer, I'm always trying to see what can I take and apply to the entire team or the entire organization to extend the inclusion of everybody. So, you know, technology has come up on a number of occasions. Technology might make it easier for an individual to return to work, but it also makes it easier to retain and support people right across an organisation or a team. So I could give you lots and lots of different examples, but I keep you here all day.
I think you talked to a really valid point though, Mary, in terms of, I was talking to one employer last week. They probably employ about 300 people, and they were talking to the challenge of sick leave and attrition within their organisation, and particular sick leave. I think they gave a figure of something around 13%, which sounded quite...
They need me. Tell them to read me.
Exactly, but you kind of wonder in that environment, you know, sometimes employers, the old perception and maybe the ignorant view would be looking at this as a challenge and, oh God, this is a burden and I have to do it. But yet if you're carrying a sick leave rating at that percentage, you're carrying a huge cost at the risk of being commercial about this. And if it's a case that you can get ahead of some of this in the conversation you talked to about people, we always think about people who are on sick leave, but actually people who are vulnerable to leaving on sick leave because they're not being catered for. And sometimes it can be the small steps that are required to try and mitigate the particular challenges and help them feel included. So I think it's a really powerful piece that you talk to, and sometimes we forget about that. I loved the example when I asked Kathy about the participant that you're most proud of, or the journey that you're most proud of in Roisin. You've talked to being north of 10 years, I think, in the role you're in, without identifying anyone again. Just is there another scenario of an individual that you've worked with and you think, wow, that was one that I really didn't think would come about, but it's brilliant?
I just think I need to stand up a bit for the Galway employers here as well, because there's a lot to talk about how Westport are ahead and everything. But I have to say...
This is a football match all over again from the weekend.
It is. We know how that went. But Galway employers are amazing. Galway employers are amazing. I would say that I could safely say here that we're probably still working with some of the employers and people that Mary would have placed when she was in the role. Because a lot of the employers that we support, the employees, you know, they outdate me in this job. We, in the last few years, will be in the position where we create about 100 positions per year, which is fantastic. There's always more work needed, which is why we need events like this, because we always need more employers to come on board. We have some long-standing relationships with some of the multinationals within the HSE, the councils. I would have a lot of work in the years with the Chamber. I see Lean down here. I would have a lot of work in the past, and a lot of support from within the Galway community. For not just ourselves as employability, but Mary's down there, she was involved in the Let's Get to Work project a number of years ago. They would have had a lot of support, and the National Learning Network, St. Joseph's Training Centres, all these people are involved in the same kind of area and would get fantastic support from employers. So just to stand up for the
Yeah,
Galway
no,
employers there.
no, fair play.
They're fantastic. Met some amazing people in this job. And when it comes to being proud of something, I don't know if I could ever say that I'm proud of something I have achieved, because I'm massively proud of my clients, and so many of them. Again, no one comes into me looking to be an inspiration, but I have been inspired all the time by the people that I meet, because the skills and abilities that I can take to navigate this world as somebody with a disability create huge transferable skills for the workplace. And it's up to me to identify those and to place them. Off the top of my head, I'm just working with somebody that started work yesterday, and this person I would have initially placed in employment probably about 8 years ago, and that employment worked well. It was the first employment for him, like I said, it went well. There were difficulties along the way. Some of it were personality difficulties, but he realised over time that what worked for him 8 years ago no longer is working for him today. So he had to take a leave from that, and he noticed that the environment wasn't working for him either. So we're after placing him in a position where it's utilising more of the skills that he has, and the things that were missing from the other employment, which was a lack of structure. There's more structure in this employment. So it's taken what we've learned from the old employment and applying it here. Both great employers, and the other position will work out fantastically for somebody else. But it just wasn't for him at the time. So I'm happy with that at the moment, because it's something that's worked out, and it's where he hasn't stayed in a position and become stagnant. He's realised that the time has come for him to further his career. And career progression is very important as well for everyone. So.
It's a hugely powerful example, because you nearly become a case manager with the individual as you're bringing them through the different
That is
employments.
what it becomes, and that's what's important about the longevity of it, because we're not just creating these relationships with our clients, we're creating relationships with our employers. An employer I worked with initially placed somebody 10 years ago, recently came back to me looking for someone new. And I would always say it's one of my favourite employers that I've worked with, but here we are 10 years later when they're taking the second person. But it's because the first one worked and they're now in a position for someone else. And they're willing to invest the time now for me to go in and do on-the-job training to get the person ready for work. So it is about creating and building the relationships, because people talk. Galway's a very small town.
Yes,
people talk
we
to
know
each other.
that.
Like, we've gotten referrals from employers where people have gone in and they're actually customers, and they know, oh, you're looking for people. Well, we took somebody from Employability Galway. You know, give them a call, because there's no obligation. Absolutely. You know, if we have somebody with the skills and abilities for the job, we will help facilitate that employment.
Fantastic. Listen, that's brilliant, Roisin. Helen and James, from your perspective, any last item you'd like to get across? I'm conscious we're coming into the last few minutes and I want to close for 11. So any key point from the lived experience last year, or learnings, good, bad or indifferent, you'd like to share?
I suppose the only thing I want to say is, and I, as I said this earlier as well, when the day ends, don't let it end, you know. And for us, there was so many things, like even videos from the event that still haven't hit our website. There was other information pages that we wanted to share with our network that we still haven't got to because of COVID, that old story, and everyone being in and out and all those kinds of things. But just take one thing, just do one thing, and just keep doing one thing, and keep building on that. It's small pieces that make the difference, so just keep that going and don't let it end at 11 o'clock today. Thank you.
Love it, and couldn't say that better. Any questions from the audience or from online, indeed, for these panellists, or indeed all the expertise is still in the room, so we'll club questions to the end rather than going through it throughout. So anything, don't leave with a fire in your belly saying, I should have asked that, I wanted to hear it. And I think the key thing for those certainly in the room is all our participants and our stand holders are here present and willing to engage over a cup of tea or coffee. But for now, folks, I want to thank you very much. So a round of applause for our last 4 panellists. Wow. And with that, I bring this event to a close. I want to acknowledge and thank Minister Abbott for remaining with us throughout. Mayor Claire Connolly is hosting the Belgian ambassador at a civic reception now at 11, so she had to dart. But sends her apologies and is looking forward to hearing more about the event. I think it's interesting if we take a Galway perspective on this through the work with Marion, indeed. I called her Marie earlier and she was giving me feedback on it. Marion and the team from Access for All role in Galway, we've engaged with Galway City Council, and that partnership has grown more and more in terms of trying to help educate and work with the business community on all aspects of ability, inclusion, D&I, etc. And to one of the points, and I was delighted Marion was part of the judging panel indeed, we, in partnership with City Council and the Mayor, presented the award for the Chamber Awards going back a couple of weeks ago, the annual Business Awards that we finally got to have our physical event after 5 reschedules. There was an award for the best employer around inclusion and how they were reorganising their work environment and helping support inclusive employment practices. And I know Mary was one of the shortlistees indeed in those awards. And I think it's those type of things that helps bring this dialogue and this debate more and more on the agenda, and just the more that we can do collectively. So hopefully there will be some more shortlistees for that award next year in this room, or maybe even online, as we move to try and do more and be more. But for now, I just want to thank and acknowledge, as I say, Minister Rabbitte and Mayor Connolly. I would thank Jack Kavanagh for a phenomenal and powerful presentation. I think that'll certainly be the topic du jour in many of our conversations as we go through the day and through the week and we talk to the lived experience. For Kevin Dempsey and indeed Pierce Richardson from the Disability Federation for their help and support for the event here today. Team at Galway City Partnership, Declan Brazel, Lisa Collins and indeed Sharon Doyle. To all of our panellists, and to all of our stand holders, indeed the team at Sound to Light, Paul and Finbar as well for keeping us going, the technology, our participants at home, my own colleagues Elaine and Betsy are here present as well. Please stay around, engage, interact, and I think the key message, if there is a message, is be the key to a door for somebody, someone along the way, so that you can actually, you know, we can move this forward. So for now, bon afternoon and safe home. Thank you.